Áine Kerr, we're so excited to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Evening all. So lovely to be amongst you all this evening. In the introductory remarks, it was mentioned that this is a place, a community for big ideas, but I have a small idea in the next 15 minutes I want to leave you with, but I think it's a small idea that can have this cascading multiplier effect in the communities around us, in the world around us, where we have a handle on a lever to do good. And as you were listening to David just now, I'm sure all of you spotted that game-changing moment for him, and it was his mother. And his mother nudging him and saying, why don't you go for it? Why don't you go and do running? And I want you to remember the mother there in that amazing story from David as we get into it over the coming minutes. But, you know, we live in this moment that I think we all know feels very overwhelming, chaotic. We're constantly having to remind ourselves and each other that change is our only constant. And it feels like we live in a moment where one crisis is piling onto another crisis, and we're trying to figure out sometimes what is the interdependency of all of these crises moments. We're trying to sense make, and we're trying to do some self-protection and control it. And theorists and economists and the amazing David McWilliams you will hear from later are all trying to kind of find labels and theories to help us contextualise and understand this moment. And one of the labels being used again is this idea of a polycrisis. Others are talking about the artificial intelligence era. Some are talking about, you know, the jungle grows back. Others are talking about the return of geopolitics. In my world, in the world of disinformation, misinformation, hate speech, I think about it, this information disorder moment. And it feels unwieldy and it feels really hard. And we're all having to kind of do this endurance test. And amid it all, and Emily mentioned there that I chair the Gaisce Council, the President of Ireland's Council for Young People, their award for active citizenship. And I chair the Shona project, which goes out into schools to help young girls with confidence and self-esteem. And I'm acutely conscious that in this moment of this polycrisis, this moment of constant change, that our kids, our young people are brilliant academically. We see it all the time. They're top of global league tables when it comes to literacy and academia, but also in the same league tables when it comes to their well-being and their health and their sense of self. They're 24th when it comes to the UNICEF report last year. That's putting them in the bottom half globally. So it leads you to this conclusion of Ireland's teens are succeeding in school but struggling in life. And we know also for our young girls with the confidence gap, their confidence decreases by 30% between the ages of 8 and 14. So that's the world. In this moment of polycrisis, our young people are having their moment as well. And then I pay a lot of attention to futurists like Amy Webb. She's written now 18 annual tech trends reports. And she calls herself a futurist because what she's trying to do is the business of strategic foresight. And she's not necessarily trying to predict the future, but she's trying to lob the ball a little bit and look at lots of patterns and trends, agentic AI. She's looking at living intelligence. But what she keeps trying to say to the world around her is you just got to try and get some decisions about that future unknown, try and get some of them done here in the moment. That we have to remind ourselves that, yes, that world feels very scary and unknown to us right now. But you know what the beauty of that ambiguity and that moment of crisis is? You still get to influence what the future can look like in the weeks and months to come. Not all of it, of course. A lot of it is beyond our control. But she wrote this letter last year. She always writes a forward. And this was her 18th tech trends report. And it's probably very hard to see it. But there's a line in it where she talks about, just as the first telescopes revealed the vastness of space, today's science and tech advances are revealing how much we don't understand about our own potential. And she goes on to talk about this moment that we find ourselves in, where the very definition of what it means to be human, humanity, is going to change in the next 5 years. And she talks about how this moment there's going to be leaders and laggards. But this foundational concept of humanity and what it is to be human is changing. And we could all make a very fear-based decision when we read someone like Amy Webb. But when I see someone like her talk about humanity, navigating humanity's point of no return, I kind of say, well, hell no to that. We still have agency and autonomy, and we still have kindness in a world around us. And it would be so easy to look at that starting slide I did there tonight, homelessness, acceleration of climate change, mental health issues, and go, somebody else's problem. And I've thought a lot about that phrase in the last few years, and some of you might recognize it from Douglas Adams, the book, The Life, the Universe and Everything, and it then became a label, a phrase in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And if you look at the quote there for a moment, an SEP, Douglas Adams says, is something that we can't see or don't see. Our brain doesn't let us see it because we think that it's somebody else's problem. That's what SEP means, somebody else's problem. The brain just edits it out. It's like a blind spot. If you look at it directly, you won't see it unless you know precisely what it is. Your only hope is to catch by surprise out of the corner of your eye. Now, if you think about that phrase, somebody else's problem, we all do it because we're human. We have to exercise some self-control, some level of self-protection, because the world does feel really hard, and the relentlessness of the rain for what feels like 100 days does not help right now. And we all think of those moments where the manager undermines a colleague, and we look to our shoelaces and we go, well, it's above my pay grade. And we have those moments where we dismiss and we go, only in Ireland. It'll only happen here. There we go again. Somebody else's problem. And where we outsource, rightly sometimes, because the world is heavy, and we outsource compassion and intervention because we assume there are institutions and systems and people who actually will make it their problem. And we've got compassion fatigue, and we've got news apathy. So we resort to the somebody else's problem. It's natural. But what I want you all to think about tonight is this idea that as scary as that future is sometimes, the beauty of the ambiguity and the overwhelm is that you actually still get to create the future tomorrow. That you get to resolve to go, do you know what? Yes, I have to accept there are trade wars. There is conflict in Gaza, conflict in Ukraine, all of these geopolitical moments beyond our control. But I still have a hand and a lever to do some things brick by brick, day by day, week by week, that have some influence, that have some control still within me. And I've been very privileged over the years to be in rooms where it happens with our president, Michael D. Higgins. And he used to constantly come back and quote this Raymond Williams phrase of, be the arrow, not the target. Don't be passive. Don't assume that the change you want to see in the world around you is ultimately somebody else's problem. Don't assume it. Don't presume. One of the worst things we can do is assumptions and presumptions day in, day out. Don't assume something is somebody else's problem. And what does the world look like? If we show up in moments where we are the arrow, not the target. We're not just sitting back, being passive. What if more and more we did put ourselves inside the solution? What if more and more we were active citizens who put our hand up, who are the trusted adults in the world around us? And David had that with his mom, the trusted adult, the one good adult who said, David, why don't you go for it? And as I listened to Kathy at the start there, I was reminded, and I'd forgotten about it, Kathy, the person, the trusted adult who gave me my break in national journalism was her dad that you referenced earlier, Dave Halloran. Yeah. So Dave, and I'm going to come to this because this is really important, because this is all about, we are the nudgers, we need more nudgers, we need more trusted adults. And Dave Halloran was the person, when I came to pursue a career in journalism, interviewed me down in the Irish Independent and gave me my break, gave me a placement in the Irish Independent for the summer at the end of my master's. And he was this gentle, calm, beautiful soul. Amid the chaos, Dave was just this anchor. And we'll come back to how the Daves of the world show up, because the reason I was reminded of Dave was because I think all the time, and the reason probably I'm here tonight is because I tried to give back to the trusted adults, the one good adults who've shown up for me at different points in my life. And I go back to my 11 and 12-year-old self. In 5th class and 6th class, I had the same teacher, Mrs. Daly, in a rural school in Monaghan. There were over 40 kids in her class for 2 years. And I was very shy, lacking complete confidence, back to the young girls between the 8 and 14 where our confidence collapses. And she pushed me way beyond my comfort zone and had me up emceeing little school events, got me into school debate, and I can still remember my pink cards at age 11 and her encouraging me, go find your voice, write about something you care about. And I got to the final of the school debating competition, and it was all about, at the time, why women were just as good as men at football, and trying to make the argument that we deserve just as much sponsorship. And if you remember back at the time, this is like 1994, Monaghan women were excelling at football, much better than our men at the time. And I am always grateful that a Mrs. Daly worked hard on me and made me her problem. And I became a teacher. That was my original vocation, which we'll come back to in a moment. But she was my one good adult who pushed and pushed and pushed and made me her problem. And I always reflect back on my 11, 12-year-old self that we need more of the Mrs. Dalys, who just do the quiet little nudges, who show up as the calm, trusted voice in a newsroom like Dave. And because of Mrs. Daly, when I got to 15, I had another trusted adult who sat me down, my uncle Frank McNally, well-known journalist in the Irish Times. And at the time, I had to pick my subjects for leaving cert before I even did my junior cert. And in the very 15 minutes he gave me of time well spent, he explained to me, go off, because I wanted teaching and journalism. And I had, at age 15, drawn a line down a page, and under heart, I had journalism and all the pros and cons of being a journalist. And under teaching, head was the pros and cons of being a teacher. And I thought at 15, this is a binary choice, and I have got to get it right. And my uncle will often joke, it's the only time I ever came to him for advice, but I worked his plan and the plan to work. And he explained to me, there is a and here. It's not a binary choice between one thing and another. And go off and do teaching, and you're going to have this generalistic, broad degree, sociology, philosophy, psychology, lived experience, out working with kids and teachers, and then go off and have education fuel your journalism. And that is exactly what I did. I did the and rather than the this, then that, because we often never get to the that, the promises that we make to ourselves. And that is the point at which I went off, did my master's in journalism. At the end of that master's, I find myself down in the Irish Independent being interviewed by Dave Halloran for a placement. And that was my break. And I say that because it's a reminder of all of these trusted adults who show up in our lives at different points of time and decide you are not somebody else's problem. And because of the Mrs. Dalys and the Dave Hallorans, I have had this amazing squiggly career where I've been a teacher, an accidental entrepreneur, I get to chair boards, I broadcast for RTE. I've gotten to do all of these things because of the one trusted adults along the way fueling all of it. And whether they realised it or not, and I've had so many people who've helped me along the way, they've been posing this question to me, and I'd ask all of you to take this away tonight when you have little moments to show up like the Dave Hallorans, like David's mother, like my Mrs. Daly, like my Uncle Frank. And this question of what would you do if you weren't afraid? What does it look like for all of us when we forget about how scary and overwhelming the world is without, and we actually say we're going to make decisions that are more loyal to our dreams and ambitions for myself, my fellow citizens, my communities, the country I care about, rather than being loyal to the fears. Because fears are what keep you inside your comfort zone and what keep our children, our young people, connected to devices and disconnected from the world where they're going to get this beautiful human connection and expose themselves to the one trusted adults and the nudgers. And what I have learned through all of the trusted adults and people making me their problem throughout my squiggly career is that they were teaching me also to endure the low moments, optimize the high moments, but ultimately day by day just build resiliency. And we all know our life, our careers do not work out in plan A. They work out when we kick the shit out of the plan B and often C, D, E, F. And that's the beauty of life. And teaching each other and our young people, there is magic to be made. Listen to David just now. Magic to be made in the hardest moments sometimes that actually turn us into these beautiful humans trying to do good in the world around us. Now, I've been thinking a lot about, well, that multiplier effect, when we have the Mrs. Dalys and the Dave Hallorans and all of these people who do these little micro moments of kindness and intervention. and these cluster moments, and what's that big world impact? And this little story came up again on Instagram last week, and I'll very quickly just explain. It was a granddad who'd left hospital, grandkid, very, very sick. And as a way of trying to pay it back, he had this moment where he realised there'd been a book left every week, just randomly in the hospital, and it had given his grandchild some relief and support. So he was turning up in the bookstore every week, going in, buying a book, getting the bookstore to wrap it, and into it he wrote, "You're very brave." Just really simple messages, and he did it every week, and the bookstore ended up asking him, "God, you have an amazing collection of books." And he said, "Oh, I go to the hospital every week and I just leave it there anonymously," to spark a little bit of joy, spark a little bit of hope. And those books turned into 650 books and created this community of people going to the hospital and creating these moments of joy for young kids in the hospital. And that's the multiplier effect, that when we say, actually, not somebody else's problem, my problem, actually. And the cascading multiplier effect that we can have as fellow humans and fellow citizens. And I put this up for all of you tonight as you reflect on who was your Mrs. Daly, who is the equivalent of the David Gillick Mom's moment for all of you. How do you repay that back? How do you pay it forward? Because all of us have little moments in life to show up for people where we're the mentors, where we answer the questions when a young person comes to us. We have moments where we can be the coach, where it's actually more powerful not to answer the question, but question it, the art of powerful questions, and help them figure it out for themselves. Little micro moments of radical kindness and just time well spent, the beauty and the gift of time to help somebody figure it out. And then there's moments where you get to be the sponsor. And I particularly ask our male allies coming up to International Women's Day in the coming weeks to be the person in the room where it happens, where sometimes there are not women who are on that C-suite and in leadership positions, whether it's the local community organisation or a bigger organisation. Be the person who puts the hand up and sponsors and says, "Áine's got that, Emily can do it," whatever it might be. So how do you show up in the world around you, polycrisis and chaos, and go, coach, mentor, or sponsor? And what I leave you with in this moment of not somebody else's problem, my problem actually, is to find those little micro moments of just radical kindness and intervention, because we can have that cascading effect. In a world that feels absolutely crazy, come back and go, where do I have a hand on a lever to be the change I want to see in the world around me? And I'll quote you the words of Margaret Mead. As you leave here, I hope maybe with one little call to action of, I know somebody I can help, coach, sponsor, mentor in the days and weeks to come. And she famously said, "Never doubt that a small, committed, thoughtful group of people can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has." Thank you.